Hello everybody, it's jrobi. It's been a while since I've done a chess match, so I figured I'd do one tonight. I had a good match against someone who's part of a chess forums that I frequent, and the reason I picked this game to put up a video is because it really emphasizes the importance of trading pieces, and when is a good time to trade and when is a bad time to trade. So I figured I'd throw this out here for you guys to discuss and take a look at. So I'm white, jrobi, and I've been opening with king pawn in all my online matches lately, and I've also been using Sicilian defense as black. And I'd say right now I've been using the Sicilian for about 3 to 4 weeks ever since I made my Bobby Fischer Sicilian video, and it's become my favorite defense for black. And right now I'd probably rate my play a little bit stronger as black compared to white. I'm still working on the king's pawn opening for white and looking into that. The reason I settled in on that opening is because I just wanted to pick an opening to stick with for a while, and I find that the center battles are pretty interesting with the king pawn. So anyway, my opponent plays his king pawn out here, and I play knight to f3, and my opponent plays knight to c6, and I've been using the Ruy Lopez as white, pretty much standard all the time now. And in this match, my opponent plays pawn to a6, so I go into the exchange variation and just take there, and basically peel off one of his center pawns. And from here, my opponent plays some pretty good moves to put some pressure on early on. I opted for c3 here instead of knight to c3, and looking back on it, I don't know, maybe I should have just stuck with the knight to c3, but my thoughts at the time were that you know, if I would have developed knight to c3, this square's held back for my knight, this square's held back, I would be defending this pawn, but really if I wanted to reposition the knight, it would take a couple moves to do that. So definitely like your feedback on that. I know sometimes in the past I've heard kind of different stories about it. Like if you have one knight developed already, it's okay to use either your C or F pawn, but definitely looking forward to your guys' feedback on that. So anyway, I play pawn to C3 with eventual aim of bringing my D pawn up here, and my opponent plays bishop down, attacking the knight. So I just go ahead now with pawn to D4. He takes knight, and I capture with queen. And then from here he takes one of my center pawns, so I recapture, and that pawn is undefended, so he brings his queen down for the attack. And at this position here, I wasn't too worried about the queen coming in on attack on my b2 pawn because my bishop was still here protecting that. So I thought I would take the opportunity to castle, thinking that I could maybe bring my rook out for an immediate attack on that queen. My opponent played very aggressively and played after knight to f6, I play bishop to e3 attacking the queen, and then my opponent takes the pawn now because really I can't take back with the queen because I just lose it to the knight. So I'm down 2 pawns at this point in the match, and from here I opted to play queen to e2. Now I'm going to take a step back here. Now my opponent basically, when taking the pawn, he's offering up a queen trade at the same time. And this is one of the things that I've been really focusing on along with tactics is making good trades, because bad trades, even if material is equal, can really hurt your position. So let's just say I would have taken here. I think that would have been a really bad move for me, just because now my opponent has a knight here on e4, which is attacking this pawn here. It's also, you know, it's just basically grabbing a whole bunch of squares in the area, and it wouldn't be a good thing whatsoever for me to let that happen. So what I did is, instead of going ahead with the queen trade, I pulled the queen back, and I knew that the trade would be coming soon, but I kind of wanted to get the queen trade into a position that was a little bit more beneficial for me. So what my opponent does here is he plays bishop to c5, and I saw an opportunity here to make the trade a little bit worthwhile. But in order to do that, I had to develop knight to c3 attacking the queen. I wanted to get his queen to move one more time before the trade went through. So he moves his queen back to e5, and now I can get a trade that's beneficial to me. So I take the bishop. Bishop can't be recaptured unless it's by the queen, and his queen can't take back anyway because it's pinned to his king. So he has to take, and now I can come in with my knight. So I went from a 2-pawn disadvantage to 1 pawn up on my opponent. So from here, my opponent plays pawn to b6, and I see no reason whatsoever to play too risky here. So I want to start trading off material in a beneficial way. I was thinking if he left his knight here, he would have to weaken his pawn structure even more by doubling up pawns on the f and the c. And my opponent played castle, attacking the bishop, but that just let me go ahead with my plans. So now his pawn structure is quite a bit weakened, and he's still down a pawn at this point. At this point in the match, I continue to offer up material trades. He doesn't want to do that there. Instead, he attacks my knight, but I wanted to get the knight out of there anyway. So I moved my knight to a good square, attacking his weak pawn here, also positioning myself to have some kind of lines of attacks in the future on those pawns. So my opponent played a good move, king to b7, and from here I play rook now to d3. I want to start taking advantage of the doubled up pawns and see what I can do. So my opponent plays rook to g8, so he's trying to line up his forces on my king side. And I wasn't too worried about this at the time because my castle position was still tight, and I didn't really have any access to it at all, and all the bishops were gone, and his knights were gone. So I felt, really, there wasn't too much to worry about there. So I play rook now to f3, attacking his weak pawn here. What I was thinking is if he would let me do that, I would not only be able to take this pawn, but then I would be able to take that pawn with the knight because his king couldn't recapture. So my opponent plays rook to e4, attacking my knight, and this just lets me move my knight into a different position to f5, and my opponent plays rook now to g4, so he's really creating a battery here. So to circumvent that, I just play pawn now to g3. As I said earlier, there's no bishops on the board. And from here, my opponent plays rook to g6, and I can tell he's trying to maybe get his rooks lined up here along this file. So what I do is I move my knight to e7, attacking this rook, which helps him get his rook over there, but I had kind of an idea. So I move my king now to g2 to protect the possibility of him coming down with eventual goals of playing pawn to h4. And he plays rook now to g5, and that lets me play pawn to h4. And my opponent makes a blunder here, and I see an open attack here to fork the rooks, and at this point my opponent resigned. So it wasn't really the victory here that really kind of intrigued me. It was more the queen trade and just the focus on the trading of material, and how if you're careful and you think it through, you can make a trade much more beneficial for you. So I'm just going to go back to the trade here. Right here he offered up the trade. He was up 2 pawns, and I just assessed the consequences of letting that knight come down here, and it was not good for me. So I didn't want to do the trade, and then I managed to get him lined up to get a better trade position, and at the same time come ahead a pawn. So take care. Thanks for watching the video, and we'll see you guys next time.